When you're sick, every minute counts. So don't go anywhere. Go to dispatchhealth.com where high-quality medical care comes directly to you. No getting out of a sick bed. No crazy driving to an emergency room. No endless paperwork. No hospital waiting rooms. Visit dispatchhealth.com to learn about our medical professionals, then make house calls. Dispatch Health is covered by Medicare and most major insurance. Go to dispatchhealth.com.
The New Jersey Transit Police Department reminds you that we all need to work together to keep our transit system safe. Your attention is our most valuable asset. If you ride the train or bus, if you live or work near a station, be alert and aware of your surroundings. If something doesn't feel right, it probably isn't. New Jersey Transit urges you to help us keep our transit system safe. Report suspicious activity to 1-888-TIPS-NJT or text your report to NJTPD.
I am a technological determinist, Marie.
A technological sorry. A technological determinist. So you're saying that the advances in technology enables and makes ethics
change,
sort of decide the ethics.
Yes, and politics, right? And everything else. So essentially, in a world where, so you can imagine, like in a world
gone mad. Yes.
In a world with the internet, right, and where labor is essentially labor has been distributed to the point where it's like most people are in service jobs. They're not actually doing labor anymore. That society now, the main commodity is no longer labor. It is privacy. It is your information.
Yes.
And so we're no longer trading in, and politics is no longer determined by, the union guy or whatever. It's determined by who has the best digital operation to collect and sell your personal information. And that will then have ripple effects to everything else. Right. So, I mean, it's essentially like a type of economic determinism, which is on its own a type of biological determinism, And I mean, listen, my viewpoints are not. Listen, Marie, we host a show about ghosts. You know what I mean? Like we talk, there's not a lot of. It's really hard to make the case that ghosts could exist and then also be a kind of a determinist in any sort of way. But I think at least, there's some wiggle room there or whatever. But that to me has always been the most compelling. Political, I guess, or not even political. That to me has always been a very compelling sort of social anthropological argument that technology in some ways decides what we consider to be okay or permissible in a society.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's more just a reflection of I don't know. It's just a reflection of people too. I mean, they probably said the same thing about television too. I mean, I think you're right in a certain regard, but like I don't know. I mean, it's sort of hard to be corollary when you're looking at, because I agree with you about data. Like I think the biggest mistake that we have is allowing a private company or really allowing anyone to amass information to that degree and not have any sort of transparency. Or have it be safe.
Yeah.
That's a huge issue. But I don't know. I think that argument, you can apply that argument to a lot of different other times when there was a technological advance and have the same sort of argument to it. And I don't know if do you know what I mean? It's like, I don't know if television did us in.
No. So that's the thing.
Or is bad.
I don't think any of those changes are necessarily bad or good. They're just different. You know what I mean? They just change our society. And
you think that those are the biggest things that are changing society, though. Those are the biggest influences.
I essentially think that the way that we interact with the world, which is technology, are the biggest things that change the way we think about the world and our place in it. I do think that, yes.
But then what about pre-technology? What was it then? The church? The printing press?
There's always been technology, though, right? Before science,
there's always been advances.
Before modern science as we knew it, yes, we were magical, we were spiritual, we were religious, right? And then now,
Right.
as we've gotten
Which would be-
better at science, science has taken over as religion, essentially. And so today, our morals are shaped by technology and science, as opposed to before, when they were shaped by how we thought the world worked, how we thought the natural world worked, but that wasn't really how the natural world worked. And in 1,000 years, when we have escaped our biological bodies and we're brains in jars or whatever,
we're just brains in boxes, man. I'm looking forward to that day.
yeah, like when that happens, our morals and societies will change again. And you know what I mean? Like that's the
I'm with. Yes, kind of.
the problem.
I can see it.
The problem with it is it completely discounts the idea that there are some things that are almost timeless,
evergreen.
Exactly. Yeah. Like would a brain?
There's a fixed moral,
right?
Yeah.
Would a brain in a jar? Could a brain in a jar love another brain in a jar in the same way that a human today could love another human?
Aw.
Like I don't
That's
know.
kind of a sweet thought, though.
Is it two brains banging on each other? Just ridiculous, Marie. But
So two brains. So then it's the love has to be sex. So that right there.
No. It doesn't have to be sex. No. But really though, what I'm saying is, I guess, if you were a brain in a robotic body, right?
So forget the box. We're not in the box anymore.
No, you're a brain in a body. Right. You still have a body.
We're a brain in a body.
But
Robotic
maybe we don't have smell. Maybe we don't have a sense of smell. Right?
Oh, okay.
Does that change the quality of the love to such an extent that we can consider it to be a different sort of love? Because they're not smelling, pheromones or whatever the hell,
But there's people now that don't have a sense of smell.
Right. And so, yeah, and they pose and that's the whole thing here, right? That's the whole...
They can fall in love.
They can. They can, but their experience is... But that's the thing, though. Because their experience is not the dominant experience, how they experience love is not the way that like society thinks of it. You know what I'm saying?
You know what? I don't think you know what we're saying.
We've gotten deep in, Marie.
We're just like, that was like the best non sequitur open for something that we're not even talking about in the episode ever.
That's deep.
Oh my God, that was funny.
So,
that was
listeners,
deep.
The reason why Marie and I started out this episode discussing economic determinism is because we're starting to do advertising on the show. So, here's the deal. So, for those that have been listening to the back catalog recently, you'll have noticed that ads have been placed. We're attempting to place them as gingerly as we can. It's a little hard when you talk as quickly as I do.
Yes.
But we are
surgical precision.
Trying to use surgical precision to add ads in. We're still kind of in the process of trying to figure out, where's the happy medium between too many ads and enough ads that we can kind of pay the people that help us work on the show.
Yes.
Those kinds of things.
Because it's still a capitalist society, even though we are devout Marxists, we still need to pay bills.
But so the idea here for the ads
need some food.
The idea here with the ads is the show is growing. We want to make it better. We want to get better equipment. We want to be able to help the people who edit the show. Jake, in particular, who edits the show right now, essentially for free.
Yes.
On top of a real day job and an awesome band and everything else. We want to help,
Desdemona,
who does
our art. Yep.
Our art, our web design, our, all on and on and on and on. So as part of that, we're hoping to do advertising, or we are now doing advertising. If you have a product as a listener that you'd like to see advertised on the show, or you are in a business that would like to purchase ad stuff from us, please let us know. We'd love to have you on. And yeah, hopefully it works out great. We're going to see.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's going to be wonderful.
Yeah.
So with that, Jake, roll the tape. Marie.
Hey, what's going on? Yes.
We're going to space.
Woo. We're going to space, man. We are going to space.
All right.
It's about time.
So, last episode of the Bigelow series, we kind of yada-yada'd our way to, and then NIDS ends. We're going to go through a little bit more this time. Just a little bit more. So, this point in the series, or this point in time, we are kind of, so NIDS will end in 2004, somewhere around there. But it's winding down from essentially like 1999, I should say, rather.
Winding down.
And to start with in this series, or this part of the series especially, we need to give a huge shout out to Isaac Coy, Keith Basterfield, Alejandro Rojas, just, doing a lot of this, getting a lot of this information around there. John Greenwald, too, from the Black Vault. There's a huge number of people that just do research in this. Dave Scott for doing some of the interviews with people and having them on. Erica Lukes for a lot of the information on Bigelow Aerospace itself. There are a lot of people doing research into this stuff that are kind of not sung from the rafters, I guess, that we're using their source work, and we're looking at their sources and pulling from and trying to keep everything straight here in this story that is so complicated. So please follow the links, go find those people's blogs, find their stuff, check them out. Anyways, by 1999, Bigelow has spent almost $10 million on UFO research.
Jeez.
And has
that's a lot.
Nothing to show for it.
That we know of. Well, but also it's like, I think that there was a lot, he spent a lot of money in general as well on sort of more privatized research that touched on phenomenons that aren't really readily explained.
Yeah. In around this time too, so 1999, 2000, around that time period, the evidence and the information about the Carpenter affair really starts to come to the forefront. Now, one thing that was pointed out to us by Jack Brewer of the UFO Trail actually on Twitter was that one of the main people to come out against John Carpenter was his wife, who was an experiencer and claimed that her hypnotherapy sessions had been leaked and sold to Bigelow. Yeah, interesting. That's why he claimed in that email chain that his wife was the one behind it all. He's kind of right. But anyways,
it's always the spouse.
It's always the wife.
It's always the wife.
So the Carpenter affair really kind of blows the lid off this MUFON NIDS connection, and it creates a lot of significant controversy. It kind of causes Bigelow to step back from MUFON for a couple years, although he's going to step back in pretty soon. He never really goes away, as far as we can tell. Around the time of NIDS closing, though, so around 2004, 2005, around that time, we also start to hear rumors and rumblings from former NIDS members, supposedly. Now, one of those members will put out a letter, I guess you'd say, and this was going around UFO forums and mailing lists at the time. We have not been able to verify this letter. It is written by one Dale Stevens, supposedly, with a very old email. It's published on July 2004.
At earthlink.net, something like that.
So right? Yeah, at cox.net. Right? But so what he says, though, we're going to read some of this. We're going to read some of this letter. And the reason we're going to read some of this is because it fits with a lot of the other stuff that is going to come out in this series, or a lot of the other information that has come out about how Bigelow has run the ranch and generally runs things just normally. Okay. So here is this quote. So, quote, I recently sat down for lunch with a former staff member of the National Institute for Discovery Sciences, NIDS. As a longtime follower of the UFO field, over the years I had often heard stories and read rumors on message boards posted by conspiratorial-minded ufologists that NIDS was a front for the CIA. That NIDS had in its possession a crashed alien spacecraft, that NIDS was privy to secrets regarding alien technology and many others. Now that my acquaintance was no longer in their employ, I pressed for answers to these wild claims. As I suspected, nothing could have been further from the truth. Many in the UFO community looked to NIDS to solve the UFO problem. Some seem to spend more time and energy gossiping about what NIDS was investigating, what NIDS should be investigating, or what information NIDS was hiding, than doing any original research of their own. Editor side note, burn. I I learned that the real question is not what stunning information NIDS is hiding, but how a research organization could have such a poor track record of accomplishment over such an extended period of time. Editor's note, double burn. My acquaintance confided that, largely unknown to outsiders, NIDS fell prey to a variety of internal problems. Poor management, lack of direction, lack of creativity, lack of funding, a negative company culture, poor hiring decisions, and low morale fueled by annual layoffs. This was compounded by the elusive nature of the field of study. In one example, when my acquaintance, newly hired, asked for direction, the response given was to spend a couple of hours a day surfing the web for items of interest. According to the former staff member, the unwritten rule for survival at NIDS was stay below the radar. This applied even to the administrator. And then they said the following: while many lessons can be learned from the problems at the National Institute for Discovery Sciences, for now the UFO community should simply know that after 9 years, NIDS as a research organization is over. Investigator Roger Pinson quit in January 2004, and with the May 2004 layoff of Deputy Administrator Bruce Cornett, there is no investigative staff remaining. Dr. Cornett moved across the country to take the position in NIDS, only to be laid off by Bigelow less than 4 months later with no severance package, and before he was there long enough to collect unemployment. While you wouldn't know it from looking at the NIDS website, the focus of the Science Advisory Board was long ago shifted to mainstream aerospace research. The National Institute for Discovery Sciences now consists only of Administrator Colm Kelleher, a receptionist, and a part-time site designer. End quote.
So basically, it's a lot like what you read on Glassdoor or whatever the website is about Bigelow Aerospace. If you go in and look at the reviews, the ex-employee reviews of working there, it's scathing.
They are bad.
How awful it is. And these aren't for people. It's not like conspiratorial, one way or the other. It's pretty much like people who went to work at Bigelow Aerospace in a number of different occupations. And there's a lot of them that are saying the same thing, which is just, it's paranoid. They are poorly run. There's nothing, so it's sort of, to me, it's very interesting that this highly, this research group that was doing something very secretive or, relatively perceived as secretive had the exact same experience, zero severance.
So there's actually a quote. So some of the Glassdoor quotes, this one's from 2019, quote, there isn't enough room to provide all the cons. Every day you wonder if you're going to be fired on the spot and walked out by guards. The morale in the company is completely shot because of this. They're so behind on technology that you actually revert backwards in your career progression. They have taken away email and internet away from half the company because the owner doesn't trust his employees.
Dang, yo! Yeah. I mean, that's another one says, do not move here, do not work here, do not trust anyone. This place is run like a prison. If RTB personally invites you to come work for him, you will be making a very costly decision. Do not put your trust in him as I did. Impossible to have a career here. His immediate inner circle knows nothing of leadership, has no experience in management, and are horrible people that only care for themselves. The person also says, DOL/OSHA seriously need to investigate Bigelow Aerospace. NASA is foolish to work with him. The rest of the reviews are true. And then one from management says, quote, ungrateful employees who think they are entitled to more than they deserve. You are not irreplaceable, and if the people writing these reviews are caught, they will be terminated immediately. Engineers and machinists need to realize they are a dime a dozen, and people are begging for jobs here. You should be grateful to be a part of this team, and grateful for Mr. Bigelow and his management team's experience. For those of you who are loyal to Mr. Bigelow, thank you. For the rest, management is watching, and you will find out just how replaceable you are. See, I think that might be a plant. To me, I would assume that would be somebody who is...
Yeah, if it reads like a plant.
Say something.
It reads like a plant. Now,
that one reads like a plant, definitely. But I would say, man...
Yeah.
That's awful.
And those are just some. There's loads. So the company we're talking about here, Bigelow Aerospace, is founded in 1999. It's founded in the middle of the NIDS years, but is essentially founded as NIDS is starting to die. And so the people that were working on NIDS appear to have been shifted over to the Bigelow Aerospace side of things. Although, again, from that letter, we also have confirmation that the NIDS Science Advisory Board wasn't really the NIDS team per se. They were mostly the NIDS team were people they hired to come live and work on the ranch, right, and perform investigations, quote unquote. Yeah. So that's kind of where things sit in 1999, and so he begins Bigelow Aerospace. And with that, we are going to have a word from our sponsors.
From our sponsors.
When you're sick, every minute counts. So don't go anywhere. Go to dispatchhealth.com where high-quality medical care comes directly to you. No getting out of a sick bed. No crazy driving to an emergency room. No endless paperwork. No hospital waiting rooms. Visit dispatchhealth.com to learn about our medical professionals, then make house calls. Dispatch Health is covered by Medicare and most major insurance. Go to dispatchhealth.com.
The New Jersey Transit Police Department reminds you that we all need to work together to keep our transit system safe. Your attention is our most valuable asset. If you ride the train or bus, if you live or work near a station, be alert and aware of your surroundings. If something doesn't feel right, it probably isn't. New Jersey Transit urges you to help us keep our transit system safe. Report suspicious activity to 1-888-TIPS-NJT or text your report to NJTPD.
And we're back.
Thank you, sponsor.
So, Bigelow Aerospace, founded 1999. The goal of Bigelow Aerospace really is for people to be able to get out into space. Space tourism has been a Bigelow pet thing for seemingly a long time. The initial idea is the creation of inflatable modules, which will allow for low-cost creation of enclosures in space for habitation. So you can imagine right now one of the biggest challenges about getting out into space and building places for people to live is how do you actually transport all those raw materials? Every ounce of extra weight on a ship is another, X amount of dollars, right? Yeah, of space fuel, of rocket fuel, of space fuel, of space rocks, fuel, of rocket fuel, and other stuff you can't bring, right? Every ounce of extra building material is an ounce of food you don't get to put on the damn ship. So it's a big deal. What Bigelow is proposing is actually not his idea. It is an initial, it's actually a NASA patent that he purchases the rights to use. So the idea is you send out kind of a lightweight but still durable material inflatable space station. So essentially think of like a balloon, right?
Yep.
In space, it's cold.
Space dirigible.
Because there's no water, because there's no air, there's no fluid in space, there's no gas or liquid floating around out there. Convection, the means by which heat gets transferred most efficiently. So convection is when wind blows on your skin. So a fluid is removing heat by moving next to a surface. That's what convection is. That doesn't happen in space. What happens in space is conduction, which is like when you put a hot thing next to a cold thing, two solids, and they just by the movement of their molecules at the interface do they exchange heat. That process happens much less quickly. So that's, for instance, one example of application where these inflatable modules might be useful. You don't actually need a whole lot of space, quote unquote, between you and the space of space. To keep you warm. There doesn't have to be a lot of material there. And because you're out there in kind of a zero gravity environment, all you really need is there's no forces from outside kind of pushing again on your ship itself or on the thing itself that you're living in. So all you really need is like a balloon out there in space. It has to be strong enough to withstand, radiation and potential cuts and stuff like that and everything else. But really, if you can get out there and inflate something, it's a pretty damn good idea. The initial design of the inflatable modules were first proposed by NASA scientists in 1961. This was designed by the Goodyear company, actually, the people that make tires. Essentially, they made like a giant, like a donut that they thought could be put on like the lunar surface.
Yeah, they made a giant tire.
Yeah, really, they made They made a giant tire.
Yeah.
That concept was abandoned until the 1990s. And then in 1997, a new proposal for a project called the TransHab, or Transhabitation Module, was introduced as being potential for use on the International Space Station. That initial design was proposed by the Lyndon B. Johnson Space Center in Houston by Dr. William Schneider. Essentially, the way that TransHab would work is it had so this is from nasa.gov. It had a multi-layer inflatable shell. So it says TransHab's inflatable shell consists of multiple layers of blanket insulation, protection from orbital and meteoroid debris, optimized restraint layer, and a redundant bladder with a protective layer. It had almost 24 layers. It was about a foot thick total, the inflatable shell itself afterwards. And the idea is that they would, the layers would protect from obviously like debris and things by essentially breaking up the particles as they hit the shell. So the idea was that those outer layers would be, almost like a foam barrier that would just stop these little pieces of space debris that are moving at bullet speeds.
Faster, right?
Yeah, faster than bullets. The shell also provided...
it's like Kevlar. It kind of absorbs it.
Basically, right? Yeah. It actually says the key to the debris protection is successive layers of Nextel, a material commonly used as insulation under the hoods of many cars, spaced in between several inches thick layers of open cell foam, similar to foam used for chair cushions on Earth. The Nextel and foam layers cause a particle to shatter as it hits, losing more and more of its energy as it penetrates deeper. And then many layers...
It's basically all stuff in your backyard is what they're building.
Kind of, yeah. And
it's amazing to me.
And then many layers into the shell is Kevlar. So there is Kevlar there, and the Kevlar is really what makes it keep Kevlar. Its shape,
yes.
Right? And then within that Kevlar is 3 bladders of what's called combotherm, which is actually initially used in the food packaging industry. And then an inside layer of Nomex cloth, which is fireproof. And... again, the idea being to make this thing composed of thin layers of material that are as durable and usable as they can possibly be, right? The core structure, kind of the material itself that makes this thing, was made out of lightweight carbon fiber composites. And that would provide like the framing for doors and stuff and dividers between compartments and everything else. And then essentially it would have a tunnel underneath it that was non-pressurized, that would provide the air tanks and other things that would be there for the initial inflation. But once it was inflated, the idea was that it could essentially exist on its own. You would have to still provide, air. You would have to provide air to breathe and everything else. But essentially, like, even if no humans lived there and it was just running over time, it doesn't really matter what gas is in there. It would still hold its shape. It would still, be inflated, quote unquote. That initial design is abandoned because in 2000, Congress essentially passes a resolution saying we don't want NASA to keep doing study on the TransHab because it's just not leading to anything they thought. It was too expensive. They thought the project was kind of going nowhere, and it was just at that time we had no plans to go back to space. So why the hell are we designing ways to live in space, right? If we don't even have rockets to send to space. So Bigelow Aerospace then basically contacts NASA. The guy who actually wrote the initial idea of the TransHab, Dr. William Schneider, is actually a call is made between him and Bigelow. Bigelow calls him and says, "Hey, what would it take for me to get this technology from you guys?" And he's like, "Well,
classic Bigelow."
Yeah, and so he says, like, "Well, let's work together." And Schneider will say in interviews, like, he was actually really impressed with Bigelow. He was impressed with the Bigelow engineering team. He was impressed with the people he met. And so Bigelow gets a patent license in 2003 from Schneider and NASA. And that's really how those inflatable modules start being a thing. It's
amazing.
Bigelow purchases the patent from this guy, and the guy goes to start working for Bigelow. Yeah, that's how that happens. One of the weird things, though, about Bigelow, and Marie, we touched on this in an earlier episode, is his personal feelings on what space, what does space mean to the American people, and what does he think about NASA not letting him personally into space? So, he has it. He did an interview in Salon with Amy Standen. And so she asks him, quote, "You've written before about the need to commercialize space. What does that mean? And how does it compare to the prevailing attitude about space, especially NASA's perspective?" And he says, quote, "It's quite insidious. NASA's version of commercialization is not privatization. Those are two very different words in NASA's mentality. NASA's view of commercialization is we, NASA, own everything. We own all the hardware. We own the facilities to move people back and forth. And when they get there, we own that facility too. So in our scheme of commercializing things, we intend to be in business. They are a federal agency that's tax exempt and that gets $14 billion a year. And so they're paying no income taxes, and here they are absolutely in business. They take 100% of the revenue of any company that pays them to do anything. And that's wrong. That's absolutely dead wrong. And it's a huge competitor to free enterprise." And so then she says, "Why do you think NASA has been reluctant to allow tourists in space like Dennis Tito, for example?" And he says, "Well, it's the mentality that we own space. NASA stands for no access to space for Americans. NATSA. That's what it stands for me, to me, and to most Americans. NASA has exclusive control.
Does it though?
And a lock on everything having to do with space, except for the Russian side. And they were just beyond belief in being rude and obnoxious in response to Dennis Tito's trip. It was just embarrassing to this country." End quote. Now, his preference for Russian space travel is going to become important in a couple years.
But let's just pick on this for just a minute.
Sure.
I think it's an interesting. It's not just libertarianism. It's sort of this entitlement, right?
Well, he's the evil CEO from the film Aliens and Blade Runner and every other evil science fiction TV and fantasy.
Well, he's certainly making a run for it. I think it's just what's interesting is it's like maybe I don't have a right to be in space. Maybe that's something that is actually true. I don't have a right to be in space because just because I'm an American does not necessarily mean I have the right to do whatever I want.
Well,
I have the right to commercialize something.
Well, it's part of a larger.
It's not for sale.
This is the same argument that is made every day in courtrooms that, there's oil under the national parks. So the national parks aren't, the government says that you can't own the national parks. Well, that's ridiculous. That's destroying free market capitalism. And that's just, it's that same argument. He's just making it about a much bigger area than we have currently. I mean,
yes.
This is really, it's a fascinating part of this argument because we talked about this with our interview with MJ Banayas. We talked about it with Mike DeMonte as well. This idea of if To the Stars Academy did have an alien material or an alien ship or whatever, do we really want the company that's making the decisions about how we first access space as a civilization to be run by,
a private citizen?
Exactly, a private citizen of any sort, right? I don't care if it's Elon Musk. I don't care if it's Mahatma Gandhi. I don't want a private citizen deciding who gets to go to space.
No, I would agree with you. I don't think and again, there's so much more to it than this entitling, because I have the money, it should be capitalism and I should be able to do it and compete for it. It's like, well, there's security. There's just so many other considerations that are beyond the individual.
Yeah,
that I am always floored at people not being able to get to. We have
a society and we have rules to protect common people from crazy billionaires like you. That's why we have these things. Because
sorry, go ahead.
No, because back before we had those rules, we had serfs, and there were kings who could kill people at their whim, and you lived on their estate, and you lived based on the corporation or before the Industrial Revolution.
We had child labor. We have a government that actually cares about what we eat. But
even from
what we're putting in our food.
Even from the capitalist side of the argument, though, right? Mm-hmm. So much of our paychecks over the years has gone to fund space travel.
True. Yes.
The amount of money that the federal government has spent on our behalf as citizens to get to space, to build NASA up, far outstrips the amount of money that individual Robert Bigelow has spent. So shouldn't the people of the country that spent that money make that decision as opposed to the individual person?
100% agree.
Absolutely.
100% agree.
Anyways, all right. So crazy. It's nuts. That's a crazy thing. The next thing that happens is, so this is around the time that he's now starting to really, Bigelow Aerospace 99 starts to do this stuff. We also have in 2002, we now know because of a recent release of what are known as the Admiral Wilson documents, that Eric Davis, one of Dr. Hal Puthoff's colleagues at EarthTech, essentially the Robin to Puthoff's Batman, appears to have been going around talking to military figures. So all we have are his contemporaneous notes. All that these notes show us is that Eric Davis wrote these notes and said that they were from 2002. But essentially what the notes say, and then there's been corroboration from the people saying, no, we saw the notes and whatever. But still, the person, the Admiral Wilson, who's in the Admiral Wilson documents, has never come out and said, yes, I had this conversation. We talked about aliens, whatever. But essentially what this document and another document that shows the NIDS team looking into the alien autopsy video as if it was real, what these documents show us is that at this time in 2002, while Bigelow is working with real NASA engineers to build, to work on a project that is, was almost on the International Space Station, his other team is looking into the book The Day After Roswell and the idea that the United States found a crashed alien and their body at Roswell and then brought them over and whatever. They're looking into that, and they're also looking into the alien autopsy video that everyone on the NIDS team, at least, so Eric Davis, Bigelow, and Kit Green seem to believe that the autopsy video at the time was genuine. That video has since come out to be a complete hoax. And now Kit Green says he does not believe the video is genuine anymore.
Yeah.
But so it's not a good time period for NIDS, right? They're looking into these things that are hoaxes or are part of a larger conspiracy mythos. They're not doing science really. They're just kind of doing stuff.
Yeah. Oh God. Yeah.
And so
it's almost embarrassing at that point too. It's just and so demoralizing to be a scientist and to want to be able to do things to further this research, and you're looking at a dude in a plastic suit.
It can't be easy. The NIDS team will dissolve in 2004. And from that point forward, the ranch seemingly sits empty, although Bigelow keeps people there. We think, at least, we think he kept people there. But Bigelow is busy with real space stuff. 2005 Hunt for the Skinwalker comes out. We've already talked about it. It will make paranormal radio unlistenable for many years to come. Then in 2006, Bigelow will finally get to space. Like, he won't get to space, but his modules will. He actually sends his Transhab modules up on the on what is known as the Russian Genesis 1 rocket. It's successful. It works. He then sends another one on Genesis 2 in 2007. And so suddenly NASA comes sniffing around and says, well, you know what? Maybe there's something to this guy and his ideas. Right? This guy's really doing stuff here. He got these up into space. What's interesting, though, is that in the year 2007, an official with the Defense Intelligence Agency will approach Bigelow, supposedly to ask him to come and see the ranch. This person appears to be a Dr. James T. Lakatsky. It being Lakatsky will make sense because soon after, what will happen is a black budget project is created for Bigelow to bid on to study UFOs through the federal government. This project is headed by one Dr. James T. Lakatsky, and it will become known as AAWSAP, which stands for the Advanced Aerospace Weapons Systems Applications Program. It is a dangerously close... the acronym is dangerously close to asswipe. It's dangerously edging towards asswipe.
It is. But again, he can bid on this. I mean, let's just pause for a second and say that the capitalism is paying off.
It's 100% paying off.
It's a government contract.
Oh my God, it's working out so well. Now,
don't you want to see sort of the runners-up for that? What the other proposals.
Evidently, there were no other. Evidently, as far as we know, there were no other proposals.
Really?
He was the only bidder. Huh. Now, this project, the bidding for this project starts in 2008. So 2007, they come look at the ranch. They start talking to Bigelow. 2008, it's open to bidding, and only one bidder is found. We know that from various reporting here, but it goes right to Bigelow. The people that set up this project will include Harry Reid, as well as Senator Stevens in Inouye. I can never say that name right.
Inouye.
But essentially, it was black budget money, so it wasn't like a public. It was a public bid, but like not really, right? The program, what it says the program will work on is the following: inertial electrostatic confinement fusion, advanced nuclear propulsion for manned deep space missions, pulsed high-power microwave technologies, space access, advanced space propulsion based on vacuum, space-time metric engineering. Guess who's doing that one? It's our favorite man. Mm-hmm. Biosensors and biomems, invisibility cloaking, and transversible wormholes, stargates, and negative energy. Again, by Earth Tech International. The list of people here on this list of people who are said to have been getting funding from this project through Bigelow Aerospace, it's sort of interesting. It's, again, there's always kind of those one or two Bigelow, draft picks. Like, you get me, you get my team kind of thing. But then there are
Fantasy League.
But then there are real people here who are legitimately interesting, right? One of them, Dr. Ulf Leonhardt, is on the invisibility cloaking project. He's actually one of the first people to talk about the potential for an invisibility cloaking using metamaterials for their optical properties. Now, we don't really know what's funded here, but it does look like there was at least theoretical work being funded on this project based on the documentation. And there was work being done on the ranch as well. However, the work being done on the ranch appears to have been mostly on the ranch hands themselves. This project, ASAP, whatever, will, in the year 2008, join or get a kind of subgroup. The subgroup is called AATIP, the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program. One of the projects, the AATIP project, becomes specifically to study UFOs, while the other project starts to look at other things, and it has more of a broad basis. The reason being, supposedly, that it makes others in the government uncomfortable. They have religious objections to some of the things being studied or thought about.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Now, for those that don't know, AATIP is the project run by Luis Elizondo.
Mm-hmm.
So, this is where we have and can say that there is a seemingly direct connection between Bigelow and Luis Elizondo. And so from Luis Elizondo and Pudov and Davis to the Stars Academy. AATIP will be dissolved eventually, and Elizondo will leave and then will join up with To the Stars Academy, doing very much so some of the similar research that it appears Bigelow was being funded to do while he was in the government, or while he was working on this black budget project.
Mm-hmm.
And so, with that part of the story now, we come to the early 2010s. Around 2009 is where we're going to leave it off here. Bigelow has gotten to space 2 times. He's put 2 things up into space. he has gotten a black budget project with the federal government.
Cherry gig.
Elizondo has come into the picture now, working on this project for which Bigelow was the only bidder, or the only, the let's not say the only bidder. He was the only bidder we know of so far, or to date, I should say. And he is the person who will win the contract. His company is the one that will win the contract.
Yes.
And the ranch itself, or kind of the UFO research, is now shifting away to another group called AATIP. This group run by Elizondo. But 2009 ends up being kind of an interesting year for Bigelow, because it's the year that he gets back involved with MUFON. And that, Marie, is where we're going to pick up next episode.
Oh, God. You got to say, oh, listen, my music's going. I
was like,
you got to give it to him.
Whoa! On the fly editing, that's great.
You gotta, I mean, you have to say, here's the thing, for a cat that's been doing this for as long as he's been doing it, he has an incredible amount of fortitude. If you can say nothing else about Bigelow besides money, which he's basically earned all himself. Like, all of his money is not inherited wealth for the most part, right? I mean, very little of it is. It is all him hustling and then still like staying on this enough to be like, again, at some point you would just want to go golfing.
Well, it's crazy.
But he doesn't.
It's crazy that I don't know. To me, it's crazy that they just keep
coming back to him.
Yeah, exactly. It's nuts to me that he keeps. It's not nuts to me that Bigelow keeps getting these contracts, because, frankly, at this point now, Bigelow has only had really one federal government contract.
That's official, yes.
Yeah. So the only official one he's had, though, has actually led to the reinvigoration of a project that NASA decided was dead. Right? NASA said these things were never going anywhere, and then Bigelow brings two of them to space. That is publicly a very good track record, I would say. The issue is that in the background, he's got these guys running around the country, looking for evidence of alien autopsy films and bodies, and he's got his own X-Files running around.
He's it's like this weird collector. It's like nothing's getting past him, right? There's nothing out there, but he's not going to get there's no pie that he's not going to get his fingers in.
It's very interesting. It's some very interesting stuff. All right. Dear listeners, thank you so much for listening to the Mad Scientist podcast. I am, as always, your host, Chris Cox. We're here with my co-host, Marie Mayhew.
Oh, my God. And we still have an episode left.
Oh, my God. I can't believe it. Next episode.
Round this out.
Next episode, we will go to the stars.
To the stars.
Thank you again, dear listeners, for listening to the Mad Scientist podcast. I have been your host, Chris Cogswell, joined by my co-host,
Marie Mayhew.
If you'd like to contact the show, please send us an email at themadscientistpodcast@gmail.com. That's all one word. You can also follow us on Twitter at MadScientistPod or at Team Giant Squid for Marie. And of course, you can see us on Facebook, on Instagram, and all over the internet as the Mad Scientist Podcast. And again, our logo is the one with the pumpkin head, so it's easy to see.
Mm-hmm.
If you've enjoyed the show tonight, please consider supporting us on Patreon, where the money that you give to us will help us to promote this show further, to make it better, and just to spend more time making it.
We love doing that.
We do love doing that. Our logo was designed by Carrie Shaheen. Our web design is done by Desdemona Howard.
Woohoo!
And our sound design is done by Jake Cardinal. Thanks again for listening.
Thank you. This has been a Damn It Chippy production.
When you're sick, every minute counts. So don't go anywhere. Go to dispatchhealth.com, where high-quality medical care comes directly to you. No getting out of a sick bed. No crazy driving to an emergency room. No endless paperwork. No hospital waiting rooms. Visit dispatchhealth.com to learn about our medical professionals, then make house calls. Dispatch Health is covered by Medicare and most major insurance. Go to dispatchhealth.com.
The New Jersey Transit Police Department reminds you that we all need to work together to keep our transit system safe. If something doesn't feel right, it probably isn't. Report suspicious activity to 1-888-TIPS-NJT or text your report to NJT PD.